Good evening, and welcome back to the Velvet Past. Tonight, there is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to remember. You can let your shoulders sink into the bed, let your breathing slow down, and let your eyes rest whenever they feel heavy. This story will carry on without you, like a river flowing quietly through the night. And a river, as it happens, is exactly where our story begins. Tonight, we are drifting back, further back than almost any story can take us. 5,000 years, to a thin green ribbon of life winding through an endless golden desert. We are going to ancient Egypt. Not the Egypt of adventure films, with their curses and their chases. No. Tonight we visit the real Egypt, slower, softer, and far more human. An Egypt of farmers listening to the river, of scribes mixing their ink at dawn, of 3,000 years passing as gently as sand sliding through an hourglass. We will watch the first villages take root in the dark soil. We will see the first pharaoh unite two lands into one. We will stand, quietly, at a comfortable distance, as the pyramids rise stone by stone. We will drift through golden ages and quiet collapses, meet a queen who became a king, a heretic who tried to change the gods themselves, a boy king buried in gold, and finally, the last queen of Egypt, watching her world change from a palace by the sea. 3,000 years. One long, slow night. So dim the lights if you haven't already, get comfortable, and come with me now, down to the banks of the Nile, where the whole story begins. Long before anyone had ever heard the word Pharaoh. Close your eyes and picture a desert. Not a frightening desert, a still one. Dunes the color of honey, stretching to every horizon, silent except for the wind. This is North Africa, more than 7,000 years ago. And through the middle of all that stillness runs a miracle, a river. The longest river in the world, the Nile. Every summer, far away in the highlands of Ethiopia, heavy rains swell the river's distant sources. And every summer, with the patience of a heartbeat, the flood travels north, mile after mile, until it spills gently over the banks of Egypt. It does not crash, it does not destroy. It rises slowly, like a bath filling. And when it withdraws a few months later, it leaves behind a layer of soft, black, impossibly fertile mud. The Egyptians would come to call their country Kemet, the Black Land, after that mud. Everything else, the endless golden emptiness beyond, they called Deshret, the Red Land. Their whole world was those two colors, the black of life, the red of stillness. And they lived their entire lives on the border between them. Imagine now, one of the first families to settle here. A small group of people who once wandered with the rains, deciding, perhaps over a single quiet conversation at dusk, to stay. They plant seeds in the dark soil, barley, and a kind of ancient wheat called emmer. They don't need to water anything. The river has already done it. They press the seeds into the mud, and they wait. And the land answers, generously, year after year. Villages take root along the water like beads on a string. Mud brick houses, round granaries, fishing boats made of bundled papyrus reeds. Children fall asleep to the sound of frogs and the soft slap of water against the bank. Perhaps the same sound you're imagining now. Centuries drift by. The villages grow into towns. The towns learn to work together because the river demands it. Canals must be dug, floodwater must be shared, grain must be stored against the lean years. Slowly, without anyone quite planning it, two kingdoms take shape. In the south, where the river runs narrow between cliffs, Upper Egypt. In the north, where the Nile fans out into the green marshes of the delta, Lower Egypt. The people of the south wear a tall, white crown. The people of the north, a red one. Two lands, one river. And for a long, long time, that is simply how the world is. The river teaches Egypt its deepest lesson, one that will shape everything to come. That time moves in circles. Flood, harvest, dry season. Flood, harvest, dry season. Every year the same. as dependable as your own slow breathing. The sun sets and is reborn. The river falls and rises again. To an Egyptian, the universe was not a story racing toward an ending. It was a rhythm, a pattern, something you could trust. And it's inside that rhythm, somewhere around 5,100 years ago, that a man appears, half history, half legend, who will fold the two crowns into one. If you're still with me, we're standing now at the very doorway of recorded history, around the year 3,100 before our era. And if you're drifting, that's perfectly fine too. The story will wait for you. His name, as later Egyptians remembered it, was Nama. Perhaps he was also the king called Menes in the old chronicles. After 5,000 years, the names blur softly into one another, like voices heard through a wall. He was a king of the south, of Upper Egypt, and somehow, through battle, through marriage, through patience, we truly don't know, he brought the north under his rule as well. There is a stone tablet, the Nama palette, carved in his honor, and it still exists today. On one side, the king wears the white crown of the south. On the other side, the red crown of the north. The same man, both crowns. It is, in a way, the world's oldest political statement. Two lands, now one. And with that, something entirely new appears in the world. Egypt. Not a village, not a tribe, a kingdom stretching 700 miles along a single river, the first great nation-state in human history. To hold it together, the early kings build a capital at the exact point where the two lands meet, where the narrow valley opens into the wide delta. They call it, among other names, Men Nefer, the enduring and beautiful. We know it as Memphis. Picture it in the evening light, whitewashed walls, palm groves, the great temple of Ptah, god of craftsmen, and the river gliding past. Always the river. The king who rules from Memphis is not merely a ruler. In the eyes of his people, he is something more. A living bridge between earth and sky. The one being who can speak to the gods on behalf of everyone else. Later ages will call him Pharaoh, from the words Perah, the great house. His task is beautifully simple to describe and endlessly difficult to do. To maintain ma'at, order, balance, harmony, and to keep the chaos of the red land from creeping into the black. Around the pharaoh, a whole quiet machinery of civilization assembles itself, piece by patient piece. Scribes learn to press reed pens into wet clay and papyrus, recording harvests and taxes in delicate pictures, hieroglyphs, sacred carvings, one of the very first writing systems on earth. Surveyors learn geometry by remeasuring the fields each year after the flood erases the boundaries. Priests watch the stars to predict the river's rising, and in doing so, invent a calendar of 365 days, the distant ancestor of the very calendar hanging on your wall tonight. Generations pass, dynasties pass, the first, the second. Kings are born, rule, and are later rest in low rectangular tombs of mud brick on the desert's edge. And then, around 2650 before our era, a pharaoh named Djoser and his brilliant architect, a man named Imhotep, look at those low tombs and have a thought that will change the skyline of the world forever. What if, instead of one low tomb, we stacked 6 of them, each smaller than the last, one on top of another, reaching toward the sky? Let yourself sink a little deeper into the pillow now, because we've arrived at the part of the story everyone knows, though perhaps not the way they think they know it. Imhotep's creation rises at Saqqara, in careful steps of pale limestone, the Step Pyramid, the first great stone building in the history of the world. 60 meters of stacked eternity. People must have seen it from miles away and simply stopped walking, unable to look away. But Egypt is only warming up. A few generations later, around 2600 before our era, the pharaoh Sneferu, a ruler remembered, rather sweetly, as one of the kindest of the age, becomes history's great pyramid experimenter. His builders try one at Meidum. Its angles are too ambitious, and its outer layers will eventually slump. They try again at Dashur, and halfway up, Feeling the stone protest, they gently changed the slope, creating the bent pyramid, whose softened silhouette still stands, looking for all the world like a mountain that decided to relax. And then, at last, they get it perfectly right. The Red Pyramid, smooth-sided and serene, the first true pyramid ever completed. Sneferu's son inherits all of that hard-won knowledge. His name is Khufu, and on a limestone plateau at Giza, on the west bank of the Nile, the side of the setting sun, the side of the dead, he begins the Great Pyramid. Try to picture the scene, softly, from a distance. Not the miserable slaves of legend. Archaeology tells a gentler story. Teams of ordinary Egyptians, farmers in the flood season when the fields are underwater anyway, working in rotating shifts, housed in a purpose-built town nearby, paid in bread and beer, the wages of the ancient world. They even left graffiti on the hidden stones, team names like sports clubs, the Friends of Khufu, the Drunkards of Menkaure. Ordinary people doing something extraordinary, 1 2.5-ton block at a time. For around 20 years, the plateau hums with quiet, organized effort. Ramps of mud and rubble, sledges gliding on wetted sand, copper chisels ringing against limestone, a sound like slow bells. And block by block by block, some 2,300,000 of them, the pyramid rises. When it is finished, sheathed in polished white casing stones with a point perhaps gilded in gold, it stands 146 meters tall. It will remain the tallest human-made structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. Think of that. Empires will rise and fall, entire religions will be born, and still nothing on the planet will stand taller than this quiet white mountain by the river. Khufu's son Khafra builds the second Great Pyramid beside it, just slightly smaller out of respect, and carves, most scholars believe, a colossal guardian from a knoll of living rock. A lion's body with a king's face, gazing east toward the sunrise, forever. The Sphinx. Menkaure adds the third, smaller pyramid, and the family portrait of Giza is complete. The image you have seen 1,000 times, resting now behind your closed eyes. And here is a thought to drift on. We are closer in time to Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to the building of the Great Pyramid. Even to the ancient Egyptians of later ages, the pyramids were already impossibly old, already monuments from a half-remembered dream. The pyramid age glows for a few more generations. The sun god Ra rises to the center of religion. Kings begin calling themselves Son of Ra. The kingdom is wealthy, peaceful, supremely confident, but nothing, not even Egypt, stays golden forever. And the river, the great dependable river, is about to teach the Black Land a long, quiet lesson in humility. If you've just surfaced from a doze, welcome back. We're in ancient Egypt. The pyramids are built, and roughly 700 years of the story have already slipped past like water. Nothing to catch up on. Just settle in again. Around 2180 before our era, the Old Kingdom, the age of the pyramid builders, grows tired. The floods falter. Year after year, the river rises less than it should, and the black soil gives less bread. The Pharaoh's authority, so tied to the promise of order, thins like morning mist. Provincial governors begin ruling their homelands like little kings. The center, softly, lets go. Historians call what follows the first intermediate period. About a century and a half when Egypt is not one kingdom, but a loose patchwork of rival powers. Older books used to paint it as a dark age of chaos. The truth seems gentler and more interesting. Ordinary towns actually flourish. Local craftsmen thrive, and for the first time, ordinary people begin claiming for themselves the sacred burial rites once reserved for kings alone. As if eternity, once the private garden of pharaohs, quietly opened its gates. Still, Egyptians remembered the disunity with unease, and in time, as always in this story, the river current pulls the lands back together. From the southern city of Thebes, a name to remember, for it will echo through the rest of our night, a family of strong-willed rulers reaches out, And around 2055 before our era, a king named Mentuhotep II reunites the two lands. The Middle Kingdom begins, Egypt's quiet, thoughtful noon. This is not an age of colossal pyramids. It is an age of good government, and somehow that is lovelier. The kings of the 12th dynasty, the Amenemhats and the Senusrets, drain marshes into farmland in the Fayum oasis, send expeditions south into golden Nubia, and build fortresses like sleeping lions along the frontier. Pharaohs describe themselves in their own inscriptions, not only as mighty warriors, but as shepherds of their people. And it is in this age that Egyptian literature blossoms. Scribes compose stories that will be copied and recopied for 1,000 years. The tale of Sinuhe, an official who flees Egypt in a moment of panic and spends his life abroad, aching, always aching to come home and be buried beside his river. Egyptians wept over Sinuhe the way we weep over novels. Their homesickness, 5,000 years old, feels exactly like ours. The Middle Kingdom hums along for 4 centuries. And then, once more, the long rhythm turns. The dynasties weaken. And this time, something new happens. Something that has never happened before in Egypt's long, sheltered story. Outsiders arrive. People from the Levant, from the lands we now call Israel, Lebanon, Syria, settle thickly in the eastern delta. And around 1650 before our era, their leaders simply take over the north. The Egyptians call them, roughly, rulers of foreign lands, Hekau Kasut, a phrase that reaches us worn smooth by time as the Hyksos. The Hyksos are not monsters. They adopt Egyptian ways, worship Egyptian gods. But they bring with them 2 quiet gifts that will change everything: the horse and the chariot. And in the south, in proud old Thebes, a family of Egyptian princes watches and waits and learns to drive chariots of their own. Breathe in slowly and out. We're now around 1550 before our era, and Egypt is about to enter its most dazzling age, the New Kingdom. If every story has a golden summer afternoon, this is Egypt's. A Theban prince named Ahmose finally pushes the Hyksos out of the delta and chases them beyond the horizon. Egypt is whole again, but changed. The old kingdom by the river had always been content behind its deserts, like a house behind a garden wall. The new Egypt has learned that the wall can be climbed. So Egypt decides, calmly and deliberately, to become something it has never been before: an empire. Armies flow north into Canaan and Syria, south into Nubia with its gold mines. Tribute flows back: gold, cedar, ebony, ivory, exotic animals for palace gardens. Memphis and Thebes swell into true imperial capitals, and the temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak grows, reign by reign, into the largest religious complex the ancient world will ever know. A forest of stone columns so vast that even today, wandering beneath them feels like walking through a petrified sunrise. And the new kingdom gives us people. Vivid, unforgettable people, whose faces we still know. There is Hatshepsut. When her husband the pharaoh dies, leaving only a small stepson as heir, she first rules as regent, sensibly, quietly. And then, after a few years, she does something almost without precedent. She has herself crowned pharaoh. Not queen, pharaoh. King of Upper and Lower Egypt, with the false beard and the double crown and all of it. And here is what's remarkable, what history sometimes forgets to say plainly. It works. For 22 years, she rules one of the greatest powers on earth, and her reign is peaceful, prosperous, almost serene. Her masterpiece is her memorial temple at Deir el-Bahri, long white terraces rising from the desert cliffs like something the mountain itself dreamed. She sends a famous trading expedition south to the fabled land of Punt, and her artists lovingly record everything they saw there. The stilted houses, the incense trees, the fish of a foreign sea. Her stepson, Thutmose III, grows up to become Egypt's greatest general. Historians sometimes call him the Napoleon of Egypt, though he lost no battles. 17 campaigns, an empire stretching from the Euphrates to the fourth cataract of the Nile. And yet the detail I'd leave you with tonight is smaller and stranger. On campaign in Syria, he collected plants, foreign flowers, seeds, trees. He brought them home and had them carved, botanically precise, on a temple wall at Karnak. A stone garden, still blooming after 3,500 years. Under Amenhotep III, the empire simply glows. He builds palaces of painted plaster and gold, commissions hundreds of statues, digs an entire pleasure lake for his beloved queen, Ti. Diplomats from Babylon and Mitanni write him letters on clay tablets addressing him as my brother. The afternoon sun of Egypt stands at its very highest, which means, of course, in the slow rhythm we've come to know, that the light is about to change. Because Amenhotep III has a son, a dreamer with a long, strange, beautiful face. And this son is about to attempt the most audacious thing anyone in our whole story will ever try. He is going to switch off the gods. If your thoughts are getting slower and heavier now, let them. You don't need to follow every name. Just float alongside the story. The new pharaoh begins his reign as Amenhotep IV. But within a few years, he does something no ruler of Egypt has ever done. He announces, in effect, that the 1,000 gods of Egypt, Amun in his dark sanctuary, Osiris, lord of the dead, ibis-headed Thoth, all of them, are not the truth. The truth, he says, is one thing only, the Aten, the radiant disk of the sun itself, whose rays end in tiny hands that touch all living things. He changes his own name to Akhenaten, the one who is effective for the Aten. He closes the great temples, and then he walks away from Thebes entirely and builds a brand new capital on empty desert ground, halfway down the river. A city of sun temples without roofs, open to the light, called Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. Tens of thousands of people simply pack up and follow him because he is Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is the bridge to heaven. Even a strange Pharaoh. Beside him stands his queen, whose painted portrait bust, found in a sculptor's abandoned workshop in that very city, is today perhaps the most famous face of the entire ancient world, Nefertiti. Serene, symmetrical, half smiling under her tall blue crown. Museums build entire rooms around her. Perhaps you've seen her. Perhaps you can see her now. For maybe 17 years, this experiment in one god burns like a lamp in the desert. The art of the period turns tender and strange. The royal family shown not as rigid statues, but as people. The king dandling his daughters on his knee. The queen leaning over to kiss one of them. Nothing like it appears before. Nothing like it will appear after. And then Akhenaten dies. And Egypt, with a long exhale, simply turns back. The desert city empties as quickly as it filled. The old temples reopen, the old priests relight the lamps, and the court returns to the old ways under a new king. A small boy, perhaps 9 years old, born Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten. The priests gently rename him Tutankhamun. His reign is short and, honestly, not very important. He restores the old gods and dies at about 19 of causes we still debate softly across museum conferences. His successors, needing to erase the whole embarrassing Aten episode, scratch his name from the official lists along with his father's. And that erasure, meant as oblivion, becomes the luckiest accident in all of archaeology. Because everyone forgets him, no one ever bothers to properly rob his little tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Later workmen building another tomb bury his doorway under their rubble, and the desert keeps the secret for 3,200 years, until an autumn morning in 1922, when an English archaeologist named Howard Carter, on his very last funded season of searching, uncovers a stone step, then a stairway, then a sealed door. He makes a small hole, holds up a candle, and peers in. Behind him, his patron asks, "Can you see anything?" And Carter, staring at the glint of gold everywhere in the candlelight, answers with the most famous words ever spoken in archaeology. Yes, wonderful things. The boy king, forgotten by his own people, becomes the most famous pharaoh who ever lived. There is something almost like a lullaby in that. The quietest one remembered longest. We're gliding now into the last golden stretch of the New Kingdom. The year is around 1279 before our era, and a red-haired young man in his early 20s has just been crowned. His name is Ramesses, the second of that name. He will rule for 66 years, so long that when he finally dies at around 90, almost no one in Egypt can remember any other king. Entire lives are born, lived, and completed under one pharaoh. Ramses is many things, but above all, he is a builder. Perhaps the greatest builder in Egyptian history. He finishes the vast columned hall at Karnak. He builds a gleaming new capital in the delta, P. Ramses, the House of Ramses, great of victories. And far in the south, at Abu Simbel, he has 4 colossal statues of himself, each 20 meters tall, carved directly into a sandstone cliff, gazing out over the river. Twice a year, on dates tied to his coronation and his birthday, the rising sun reaches all the way into the mountain's heart to light the statues of the gods within. The alignment still works today, 32 centuries later. In the 5th year of his reign, young Ramesses marches north to face the other superpower of the age, the Hittite Empire, at a Syrian city called Kadesh. Ambushed and nearly overwhelmed, he personally rallies his household troops and fights his way clear. The battle ends, in truth, in a draw. Ramesses goes home and has the greatest victory of all time carved on approximately every flat surface in Egypt. We may smile at that, but here is the lovely part. Some 16 years later, Egypt and the Hittites signed the world's first surviving international peace treaty. 2 great powers agreeing, in writing, on peace and brotherhood forever. A copy of it hangs today in the United Nations building. Forever is a long time. So far, between those 2 empires at least, the treaty has technically never been broken. The long afternoon of Ramesses fades into evening under his successors. Around 1177 before our era, drought and famine ripple across the whole eastern Mediterranean. Entire civilizations, the Hittites, Mycenaean Greece, flicker out like lamps in a wind. Mysterious raiders the Egyptians call the Sea Peoples surge against the delta, and Egypt, nearly alone among the old powers, beats them back and survives. But she is tired now. The gold mines give less. The tomb workers of the Valley of the Kings stage the first recorded labor strike in history, politely, sitting down beside a temple, asking simply for their bread rations, which were late. Egypt's imperial summer is over. What follows is not a fall. Egypt never quite falls, but a long, gentle autumn, 1,000 years long. And even autumn, as you know, has its own kind of beauty. Stay drowsy and warm where you are. We're nearly at the end of our long night, and the story softens as it goes. Through the centuries that follow, crowns pass over Egypt like clouds. Libyan princes rule for a while, then kings from Nubia, the 25th dynasty, who see themselves as the true guardians of the old ways and even build pyramids again, small, steep ones, far to the south under different stars. Then the Assyrians pass through like a storm. Then a proud native revival under the pharaohs of Sais, when artists deliberately copy the styles of the Pyramid Age, 2,000 years before them, history growing nostalgic for itself. Then Persia folds Egypt into the largest empire the world has yet seen. And then, in 332 before our era, a 24-year-old Macedonian arrives at the head of an army, having toppled Persia like a stack of clay pots. Alexander the Great. Egypt opens its gates without a fight. The priests crown him pharaoh, and near the sea, he traces the outline of a new city with barley meal, in the practical way of soldiers who have no chalk. Alexandria. He will never see a single street of it built. Within 9 years, he is dead in Babylon, and his generals divide the world. Egypt goes to his most cunning general, Ptolemy, and for the next 3 centuries, the Ptolemies rule from Alexandria. Greek pharaohs in a Greek city on an Egyptian shore. Their capital becomes the wonder of the age, the lighthouse on the island of Pharaohs, taller than anything but the pyramids, its fire visible far out at sea, and the great library, gathering, so it dreamed, a copy of every book in the world, sciences and poems shelved together like sleeping birds. The last of the Ptolemies is a woman whose name you have known your whole life, Cleopatra, the seventh of that name. Forget gently the melodrama. The historical Cleopatra spoke perhaps 9 languages and was, remarkably, after 300 years of Greek kings who never bothered, the first of her whole dynasty to learn Egyptian. She was a naval strategist, an economist reforming currency, an author, by some accounts, of works on medicine and measurement. For 22 years, by wit and alliance and sheer nerve, she kept Egypt independent while Rome swallowed everything else on the map. She allied with Julius Caesar, after his murder with Mark Antony. Together, Antony and Cleopatra dreamed of an Eastern empire to balance Rome, and for a while, on paper and in gold, it existed. But at the sea battle of Actium in 31 before our era, their fleet is broken by the cold, methodical Octavian. A year later, with Alexandria falling and Antony dead, Cleopatra chooses her own ending, in her own palace, on her own terms. By the bite of an asp, says the legend, though the truth, like so much in tonight's story, is veiled and quiet. She was 39. And with her, after 3,000 years, after Nama and Khufu, Hatshepsut and Ramesses, after more than 300 pharaohs, the line of the great house ends. Egypt becomes a province of Rome, the empire's granary, its river feeding new masters as patiently as it fed the old. But here is the gentle secret at the end of our night. Egypt didn't really end. The river still rises, tamed now, but flowing. Farmers still work the black soil of the valley. The pyramids still stand at Giza in the evening light, and the Sphinx still watches the sunrise, as it has for 4,500 years and counting. Our calendar of 365 days, our paper, our geometry, the very idea of a nation, all of it carries a little Egyptian dust. 3,000 years of mornings by the river. And every single night of all those years, people just like you lay down in the dark, listen to the water and the frogs and the wind, and let sleep come. Whatever tomorrow holds for you, it can wait until tomorrow. The story is finished. The lamp is low. The river of it all flows on quietly without needing you to watch. Thank you for drifting through time with me tonight, here on The Velvet Past. Sleep well.